Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We certainly look forward to sharing the content and discussing how to create a crisis communication plan. As a reminder, like Lauren said, just make sure for the virtual etiquette during the presentation, make sure you're muted. And please type in your questions in the chat box, and we will discuss these at the end of the presentation. We will try to get these right after. And here with us today, Megan Bubella, Communications Manager at TDI Industries. Megan Bubella is overseeing all internal, external PR and digital communications for this Dallas-based employee-owned mechanical construction company. A 6-year partner, Megan oversees a lean team who supports 2,700 partners across the Southwest. She led the revision of the company's crisis communication plan and guided COVID-19 corporate communications for partners and customers alike. Megan is a graduate of Texas A&M University, the immediate past president of IABC, International Association of Business Communicators, in the Dallas chapter, and has served on its board since 2018. Additionally, Megan has served on TD's World Class Safety Team, United Way Committee, and Community Support Committee. And also with us, we have Jamie Dabbs, Director of Safety at TD Industries. Jamie Dabbs is overseeing safety, health, and environmental programs at TD Industries. He's a 12-year partner and oversees a department comprised of 27 plus safety professionals and one mobile medic. Jamie is involved in the Dallas-Fort Worth TEXO and National AGC safety committees. TD Industries has been recognized as a National Safety Excellence Award and CSEA award winners multiple times since 2014 and has been featured twice for its safety efforts and innovations in Professional Safety Journal. Jamie is a graduate of Southeastern Oklahoma State University and holds an ASP and CSP certification. Now to move forward with our presentation here on how to create a strategy. Megan, let's start with you. Mention if you had a communication plan prior to COVID, and if so, mention how the process worked and what was working well and what wasn't due to this global pandemic.
So for TD Industries, we actually do a lot of planning previous years. So for example, right now we're doing planning for 2021. We're pretty consistent with making sure we have communications plans in place just overall, whether that's for our internal audience, which are our partners. That's what we refer to our employees as we're employee owned, or for our customers and our community. So we did have communications plans set in place that were objective based. As a company, we look at our objectives from a corporate standpoint, and once those are set in place, they kind of all funnel down into our different businesses and what their goals and focuses will be, whether it's a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, or a 5-year plan. In addition to that, we also have had communications plans in place, but never have had to use them like our current situation. So, for us, really our focuses were on our objectives at the time. As we were preparing for our current state, thankfully, Jamie and I had some conversations very early on in 2020 about needing to take a look at what our pandemic plan looked like and our crisis communications plan looked like, but I don't think either of us prepared for this pandemic taking the legs and tentacles like it did, and kind of put us where we are right now.
So yeah, I would say TD's crisis comms was really emergency slash reactionary based. We would intake, claim, and deal with the events at hand. Being reactionary was not great. And one thing that's really helped over the last 6 years is comms and safety at TD Industries works very closely together with our safety branding and communications. Has helped us be a lot more effective. Pandemic was really not on our minds, especially thinking back to like H1N1 and how it required a lot of response in the industry, but didn't really pan out to be very impactful.
No, exactly. I mean, most of the companies were not expecting also to fall within this pandemic or were even ready to proceed with their operations. So how did you modify or change your communications, your existing communications plan following the onset of this pandemic?
So for communications, we took a hard look at what we were communicating and kind of hit pause on anything that was irrelevant, especially because we knew we didn't want to be putting out information that was unfactual, or that just wasn't at the top of minds for our partners or for our customers. We started to build in what we called, 3-week look ahead plans. So, we were kind of in that plan, do, check, adjust state of how we were going to communicate moving forward. Everything was moving so fast. You couldn't really write out plans and assume that they were going to be the plan that you stuck to 2 to 3 weeks from the beginning.
One thing I think
Sorry, go ahead.
is not only do we have to move fast, these communications involved much more people and much more departments. And I think one thing we had to change was who was being involved in different levels of communications.
Right. We were very intentional with, like I said, the information we were putting out, very focused on what was relevant and factual. We had a lot of hands in the pot, but at the same time, we kind of had a process of who started and who completed, right? And that was what we used to keep moving and making sure that our information was consistent and constant.
Yeah, and we understand with this pandemic, things were changing on a daily basis, so it was hard to keep up or foresee and look ahead how the operations were going to change. So what were the first steps that the communications division took? What, let's say, were the changes that you were sort of administering for this type of pandemic? What did you have sort of a guideline, or what were the first steps that you thought worked well and what didn't in comparison to previous?
Our communication shifted pretty fast. As we said, we started focusing really intentionally on what was relevant and important to our partners. We moved pretty fast to start developing FAQs and what we refer to as our action protocols. In addition to that, we also set up a crisis email hotline that partners could email into, asking any COVID-related questions, voicing concerns, offering feedback. And as we started monitoring that, you could see themes, of what was of concern. And so those were used to help consistently build out our FAQs. We also made sure we identified the right partners within those teams to respond. So for example, if it was a safety concern, Jamie was a part of crafting that message back to the partner. We also made sure that we were informing any leadership if there were concerns that they needed to be made aware of from certain teams.
To add on, our response plans prior were more antiquated, hard copy. And so we needed to go QR code, digital base. We needed to be paperless, but we also had to have a lot more frequent group communications and still maintain social distancing. So we had a lot of things we needed to think through. We utilized our safety app to create some COVID protocols. This helped us not only just be communicating, but we needed two-way communication. We needed to see kind of what was being retained and what gaps were still on projects. And so with those COVID protocols, this was giving our safety managers real insight into their business unit and teams gaps for any COVID-19 PPE protocol following, anything we really needed to be aware of. Being an essential business, we needed to still deliver for our customers and keep our partners safe at all times. We had our office staff working remote as much as possible, and so we've done more digital comms and really focusing on that two-way piece. Some other things we did to try to pull back information in that two-way communication thought is with our lone workers, we were using some of those app protocols to allow us to make sure we were still doing daily questionnaires, even when someone was working alone.
Good. And as we understand, for these sort of communication plans, you always need to have the internal as well as the external. So thank you for mentioning all the internal practices or guidelines that were in place. As you mentioned, you had the FAQs, the internal newsletters or letters and platforms to like the hotline and to just basically notice the trends that were happening. Jamie, you mentioned for the job site going paperless, the QR coding. So how could an ABC member company start to create their internal communications plan? Do you have, while you were working through this plan, did you have any specific resources or anything in particular in terms of platforms that you would like to share with our members?
So we have an intranet that is used pretty consistently to communicate to our partners. In addition to that, we also have a large group that is not directly connected. So we really took advantage of, we have a closed Facebook group that we were pushing that messaging out on as well. That really hits our field partners more frequently. We did build out web pages that we were constantly updating with current information and driving those links to our partners, whether it was via a QR code or sending out internal emails and making sure that information was getting filtered down to our field. We also took advantage of the fact that, as Jamie mentioned, our communications team and our safety teams are very closely connected. And especially in this type of situation, Jamie was producing safety memos that was just pushing out communication so that his safety team was able to get that information out to our field pretty quickly as well.
One thing to add on there is if I'm giving some other company advice on how they can build their internal comms, my first thought is go external. You want to go learn from your peers, lean on your ABC safety committee, lean on any of your peer group companies that your business works with. Go find out what they've tried in the past that hasn't worked, what's helped them be successful. And that gives you a good starting place, especially with a pandemic such as this, where we're in uncharted waters. We're all having to try so many things so quickly that we're learning, and we're learning fast, and we're getting better, and the industry is getting better. So that was very helpful. And then internally, we have a mobile medic. We partner with a company called MedCore that I'm sure most are familiar with, and having the mobile medic has been something that's been great. But beyond that, we're connected to their network of physicians, and we are able to get very, very good feedback on any protocol that we are wanting to create around COVID response. And so I would say it's a network of things and a lot of brainstorming.
All right, and through those communications shared internally, we know, of course, with the pandemic, things were changing rapidly. People did not have maybe the proper information, or this was certainly causing a lot of panic. So how were the communications internally sent or worked with the employees to stop that spread of misinformation or stop that sort of enhanced panic within the group?
So very early on, our very top leadership started a committee where they were coming together. I think it was daily, and then eventually it became weekly, and now it's just kind of as needed. But they were constantly fleshing out information from the CDC and any other health organizations that we needed to make sure we were pushing out to our people. And so it kind of started there. And really that information was coming really hard and fast at us. So we had to be ready at a moment's notice to shift in what information was going out, when it was going out, what platforms we were pushing it to, who viewed it, before it went live. And then just that constantly adjusting as we moved. All information remained very current and top of mind at the very beginning. We used a lot of video-based messaging when we finally found a space where we were still running full throttle, but could kind of put our feet on the ground a little bit, and really took advantage of our CEO does a great job in delivering messages to our employees. And so using him to really push those important messages out. We're very transparent in our communications. So it was all things from the state of the company, how we were doing during this time, to the number of cases that we were seeing amongst our own partners, to the number of partners who chose to self-quarantine due to potential exposure. And I think that really helped keep our partners kind of at ease. And then when things kind of got to a state where it was, okay, we get it, we know what's going on, we know what we need to be doing, we tried to start filtering in things that just kind of let them know that we were there for them. What kind of mental health check-ins do we need to make sure they're aware of? What kind of training do we have that whether it's personal or professional development, that they still needed to be mindful of, that we were here to help support them throughout this whole process, whether they were out in the field or they were forced to work remotely from home.
I think transparency is key. TD Industries is an employee-owned company, and it's a servant leader company. So I think rallying around a crisis fits well with our nature. And I think a lot of things what Megan mentioned was really what kept us focused and not leaning into fear. Some other things that I think were important was stockpiling a lot of PPE, sanitizer, everything we needed to feel safe and to have supplies on site, and publicize that, make sure we had ample product for our individuals and our partners to have access to. I think that was important. And then publicizing across or socializing across our partners the number of positives. But I think a lot of companies need to make sure that they're focusing on putting them in context. So talk about you're recovered, talk about active cases, talk about asymptomatic, really the amount of tests given. And that's another place where we had an advantage in the space, is having a mobile medic on staff. We're able to do our PCR tests in-house. And so being able to have access for our partners to get tested here at our facility is important as well.
Thank you so much for you. And no, certainly the transparency, like you both said, it goes a long way for the employees. They build that trust, and the enhanced communication doesn't hurt at any point. So now let's move on to the external communication, since we know a lot of the times could be different from what is exposed to the employees in comparison to what is exposed to the customers or the clientele. So discuss any information relevant or important that you would communicate to the customers or your clients. What did you focus mainly on?
So really early on, we started monitoring what we were receiving, and there came a point where it's like, we need to start developing communication. This thing isn't going away, and we need to make sure that we're arming our leadership and any of our frontline partners who are getting approached with communication as to what TD was doing to help support our customers. So we started building out, templated emails that leadership could use as they needed to. As I referenced earlier, we built some web pages. We made sure that our protocols were replicated on an external facing web page, so that customers, community, anyone who came across that page could see kind of the most current and up-to-date information as to how TD was taking those safety measures. And we were not just making sure our people were safe, but we were making sure that our people were being safe when they went into other facilities. We're construction, service, and facilities maintenance company. And so it's not just about the job site. We do have people going into buildings that may have been occupied. And how were we making sure we were communicating our safety protocols for those customers?
I think this is one thing that Megan's team really just knocked out of the park. And it helped us be consistent across every geography with the same information that we were given to our customers in a nice packet, if you would say. But I think this was one of the things we did best in this response.
All right, thank you. And So Megan, you did mention a few of the channels, like, the website, providing that information through the portal. What other channels would you share information or updates externally on? Did you, let's say, use a lot of social media? Did you have a specific, maybe a newsletter tailored aside from the emails that you mentioned, but anything specific that was used for the external communications? Did you make use of social media a lot during that time? Let's say
So
the start of COVID?
really early on, we didn't really take advantage of the situation in terms of pandemic. We wanted to make sure we were being very smart about our messaging. We really just focused on our brand, right? What was TD's brand? What is our culture? What do we do? How do we support our community? How do we support our customers? Once we kind of saw that, again, this wasn't going away, we knew we had an opportunity to really speak to our customers and to prospective customers as to really how we were taking a look at the industry. And we're mechanical construction, so anything from HVAC to plumbing, what were we doing to make sure that we were safeguarding the equipment that we were servicing or installing in our buildings? And so that's when our campaign started to shift, and we started refocusing our communications on what we were doing as a company to support customers. So our social stuck to brand and culture until we were really able to communicate a strong message as to how TD was supporting anyone as it related to UV lighting and what that looked like. Was, should they consider different filtration for their HVAC systems? What about plumbing? Are they thinking about flushing their systems? So we really waited until we had the right message to start taking advantage of any social and digital platforms outside of our company and brand.
That was a good opportunity. You mentioned a good point about the UV. So we design build our HVAC systems, and it was a good opportunity for us to publicize how we can go help make our customers' buildings safer.
And again, transparency is key, and providing the right information in that external message, like you said, taking the time, thinking it through, and knowing exactly what information would be useful to the clients. It's very, very helpful. So now moving on to our ABC membership, and if they would like to create an external plan, what steps would you recommend for them to start? Or do you have any resources that they could probably rely on for their external communications plan?
So, I mean, obviously we're B2B company, and so what's relevant to our customer? I think there are external facing protocols web pages out there for anyone who wants to reference it. You can also visit tdindustries.com, and there's a little pop-up that will occur that you can click on to get to those protocols. We also took advantage of email signatures for our sales teams, and making sure that we put the right image CTA in that signature that went to the right communication for whomever they were delivering that email to. And then just being very targeted with your communication with your audience, making sure that you know your customer, and arming your sales team with the appropriate information to be consistent, so that they're also speaking to customer or prospect in the same voice that the marketing team is speaking, to help support one another.
From my point of view, from the safety department, one thing is probably beneficial to take some of this in bite sizes. So if you're starting out today, what can I do? I could start out by branding my safety comms first. Scaling safety programs or safety communications was nothing new to us. It's something we do very well, because we first years ago had started working on branding our safety images and our safety programs for use and stuff like this.
I think to add to that too, Sylvia, as Jamie mentioned, and one of the reasons he's on the call today is safety is TD's #1 priority, and safety didn't change throughout all of this. If anything, it got it became more heightened. And then it even became beyond just what we consider as safety practice, right? You know, what were other things we were doing to monitor that safety, and how were we pushing that message out consistently so that our customers and our community really understood what we were doing.
Thank you, Megan. Now, we understand, of course, during a crisis moment, media can come into play as well. Not so much, again, related to COVID, it could be, but during any other crisis, can you discuss any of the protocols that you currently have in place? Let's say if a reporter were to reach out, trying to get maybe a comment at the job site, mainly for you, Jamie, any type of construction status. So what are those protocols in place if anyone were to approach any of you or perhaps the employees on the job site?
So we make sure that our partners push all media requests through the marketing communications team. You know, we make sure that we've armed our people with holding statements. And as I mentioned earlier, we started building out kind of that next step of our crisis communications plan. So what do those scenarios look like? And we make sure that we're just very consistent with monitoring how those things come through. It's very rare that you will get media get through into a job site. They may make it to the front gate, but it's rare that they get through. So thankfully, there's usually someone there to help hit pause before they, you know, come on site. If someone calls, you know, an office or something to that nature, our people are armed with that consistent message of, you know, we're not able to provide details about the information, but here's the contact information for someone who you can speak to. And then we make sure that that person that does get that media inquiry is ready to communicate back what we can and cannot speak to at this time.
So those scenarios is a good jumping point for me. I have escalations for my role where if something happens, especially if one of our buildings, and I may be, or my team may be one of the first calls to come address it. And so we have escalations of who we're going to contact based on the media request. And so, for example, our senior vice president of our marketing team will be my first escalation if something occurs where I believe media is going to be on site or involved.
All right. So again, we would channel that to a specific person or division team that would be well informed. So for those people that would actually provide a statement, what information would it be required or that you need to make sure that it's provided or included in that statement?
Well, I think it's what is there on the slide. You know, we can't provide any details, and please reach out to your business unit leader or your marketing communications leader with more information. And then, you know, for us, as Jamie mentioned, the scenarios, we refer back to every situation is different, but there's usually a formula that you can refer to, and we really hone in on what that looks like.
Okay. And now switching a little bit into the COVID and global pandemic, from your experience, have you noticed more or less interest from the media during this crisis?
I would say we've definitely had some interest. It's really been around, you know, the UV lighting, indoor air quality, plumbing sanitation, which for us is our area of expertise. So we've had some opportunities to speak to things that, you know, our customers need to be mindful of. We haven't really seen any negative media regarding any of this, especially around the pandemic. You've seen some, you know, as it relates to other things that are going on in our current climate, but not necessarily around our industry's COVID-19 responses.
The other piece was a return to office protocols and innovation that we've used. We had some interest there. We also used a third party to help us with some signage. We do a lot of comms just based on signage for our job sites, for distancing purposes, and for other COVID protocols.
Okay, thank you both. Now, of course, the crisis is never a good moment. No one wants to go through that. But how would you expose that to our ABC members in order to positively highlight the company during a crisis?
Be a thought leader. Be a thought leader in your area of business. Your company is an expert, right? And so really focus in on whatever that expertise is. For TD, it's filtration. It's making sure our company, our customers are mindful of Legionella's disease. It's the safety and those steps that need to occur to make sure your people are safe, your customers are safe, your community is safe.
I think part of that image too is highlight which of your core values really elevated and shined. Your company can talk about core values a lot, but if you don't live them, it will show in a crisis.
Certainly. I mean, focusing on the mission of the company, what benefits the customers, as well as, all the employees within culture and values, that would certainly get you a long way and provide the most positive message for everyone. Now, following the post-crisis, there's always communication as well after that. Do you have a post-crisis communication plan in place? I mean, we understand, of course, the crisis will go away at some point. How do you maintain your brand image and awareness?
We're always fine-tuning our communications. It is a new world for all of us. And so it's a constant, plan, do, check, adjust as we move forward. Thankfully, we have been able to maintain our brand image throughout pandemic. And as long as we hold true to our brand and our culture, that won't change. Jamie mentioned our core values. That's something that's very ingrained in TD Industries and the people who come through our doors. And so we do have to make sure that we are mindful in our communications. There's civil unrest occurring in our country. We have to be very cognizant of the content that we're putting out there. And that does include visual elements. There were some things early on that we could have been better about as it related to images, wearing face masks and things of that nature. But it's going to be ever evolving. This is all new territory for everyone. I also, want to say, use your resources, as Jamie mentioned earlier. If you have a budget for resources, use them. If you have a small lean team like I do, they got burned out really fast. And that's when we really noticed that, hey, we have an opportunity to bring some extra hands in to help get this one thing done. And so don't think you have to do it all. Also mentioned earlier, do things in bite sizes, as you go. And just always be willing to flex when the situation changes, because it's probably going to happen.
Jamie, anything that you would like to add to that?
I think, post-crisis communication, it's funny to think about this because we're still in the midst of this pandemic,
yeah.
But it's becoming a somewhat new normal. So I think just keeping the mindset that you're on an improvement journey as you're going through this, documenting what works well and doesn't work well, celebrate your successes, highlight those with your customers, and make sure that they're aware of all the efforts that you're performing to try to deliver on-time, safe projects.
Now, it's very difficult to foresee a crisis, more of this magnitude, of course. I don't think any of us were prepared or knew what was going to happen. But if you could provide us, probably not just focusing on COVID, but any other type of crisis, how early do you recommend to start creating a plan?
Immediately. Thankfully, we have our top 11 scenarios in place of things to consider. In that is disaster, fatality, things that can happen on a job site or just in social world. And so we've got some plans written out. We have scenarios built out. But you really have to start as quickly as possible. And that doesn't mean that you immediately start responding. It's you start reviewing your plan, writing out your plan, and then making sure you're ironing out any details before you respond to anything.
Working through tabletop exercises of your known issues will help you be much better at responding to the curveball. And so one thing we've learned is when that next curveball comes, our mechanisms for building this scenarios or these plans is much more sharpened. We'll be faster.
Now, what has been your biggest takeaway, or what did you wish you knew, in the past 6 months from all this big scenario that we're experiencing at this moment?
Megan, you want to take that one first?
Oh, great.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I think for us, very early on, we all thought this was something that was going to fly in and fly out. And so maybe we just weren't prepared to be in it as long as we have been. And so, kind of preparing for the worst, kind of situation. It hasn't been all bad. We've learned how to become more agile and to move quickly in situations that we weren't prepared for. I also would say, the past 6 months has been interesting. And so you don't recognize the things that you took for granted, earlier on. So I think for our team, it was really just being willing to flex quickly to the fact that our plan kind of got blown up and we had to shift and do something else.
I think that's a good point. In especially occupational safety and health, we're used to building a program, plugging it in place, and letting it run for years. And obviously, we'll look at things annually, but this is so much different when we're having to update protocols sometimes twice a month or even more frequent. So I think, like Megan said, just early on, if we'd have known the staying power, if we'd have known how long we actually would have been working remotely, it would have been, we would have been able to focus on some things more in detail and phase out some of those things that weren't as critical.
Yeah. And this has certainly changed every single business out there, including the construction industry. But how do you think this will progress or shape the industry going forward?
I think the way we handle the common flu season may change completely moving forward. I could see masks coming back in the winter or in flu season every year. I could see social distancing practices sticking. Also could see us being paperless quicker. I think the drive to go paperless, I think there's going to be less travel. I think Microsoft Teams has completely changed the dynamics of how people communicate across their companies. And I think companies will be a little more prepared, and our country will be a little more prepared for the next need for N95 usage.
Just to kind of add to that, we've seen the use of technology, especially for our office-based people, really be heightened. Probably wouldn't have started my team on a whole bunch of new platforms had we known that we were going to be doing a lot of this stuff remotely, but we've seen people really adjust fast to meetings like this, to webinars like this, and do it pretty easily. I think you're going to see a change too in at least our construction industry in terms of technology and how jobs will be built moving forward. I think there's a huge push out there for how do we continue to build and grow while being mindful of this kind of thing and the safety that's going to need to be in place to continue to thrive.
Thank you both. And I think the industry from the get-go was certainly fast forward thinking. They were able to change their protocols and on a daily basis to be communicating with other industry members, and that certainly helped out. Now, we thank you both for your time. I think for today, that's all the information and content that we're able to provide, but we are certainly open for questions. I believe these were sent to Lauren. If you want to step in, Lauren, and let us know if there were any questions for Megan or Jamie.
Hi, everyone. So thank you, Megan and Jamie and Sylvia, for facilitating and speaking for our seminar this morning. At this time, we don't have any questions. I think you guys really hit the nail on the head with this seminar. So thank you all. But if anybody has any questions, can you three maybe stick around for about 2 minutes and see if anybody has anything? And then if not, we can probably just end a little bit early.
Sure, we'll definitely stay here.
I'll throw in one other thing. Just something that I'm really proud about that we've done during this pandemic when it comes to that two-way communication is I don't think I ever realized how much we're going to need back from the job sites and the project level. And our safety engagement around our COVID-19 protocols was huge. So I looked just this morning, and we do daily checklists for screening on our job sites for those things we need, those gaps, those personal screenings of everybody that's coming on our projects. We have over 22,000 that have occurred since March. And then if we look at our lone worker temperature checks, we have close to the same. And so we've got this huge amount of engagement that's happening, is allowing that two-way communication and giving us some visibility on how to improve continuously.
Thank you. We're just looking here for any additional questions, if there might be from the group.
Sylvia, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. I don't think any more comments are coming through, but thank you again for everything. And if anybody on the call has any questions following the wrap up, you can certainly email them to me and I can relay them to Megan and Jamie. I'm sure they'd be thrilled to answer any additional questions that come through. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and hope you all have a great day and stay safe out there.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks,
Thank you
Sylvia.
all.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.